When you lose everything, even a broken-down cabin feels like mercy. Cal Monroe knew that feeling well. At 61, he'd been sleeping in his truck for 3 years, watching his daughter Mia slip further away with every passing month. Then a lawyer called about an inheritance from a cousin he'd never met, an old cabin in rural Tennessee. It wasn't much, just rotting wood and overgrown vines, but it was shelter. While pulling up the floorboards to fix what they could, Mia discovered a hidden basement sealed shut for decades. Inside were wooden crates filled with paintings, old bonds, and ledgers pointing to a fortune worth over $140 million. But the real question wasn't what they found. It was why someone would hide it all and walk away. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special. The morning sun hadn't yet cleared the Walmart parking lot when Cal Monroe woke in the back of his 2004 Ford F-150. He'd positioned the truck in the far corner, away from the security cameras, where the overnight manager wouldn't hassle him. 3 years of this life had taught him the unwritten rules of survival. Be invisible, be clean, be gone by 7. He sat up slowly, his back protesting the movement. The sleeping bag was thin, and Tennessee winters found their way through every gap in the truck's weathered frame. Cal reached for the plastic jug of water he'd filled at a gas station the day before and poured a small amount into his palm. He splashed his face, ran wet hands through his gray hair, and reached for his razor. The reflection in the truck's side mirror showed a man who'd once been strong. At 61, Cal still had the build of someone who'd worked construction for 30 years. Broad shoulders, calloused hands, a face weathered by sun and circumstance. But his eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of a man who'd watched everything slip away, one piece at a time. He pulled a clean shirt from the carefully folded stack beside him. Laundromat every Sunday without fail. A man could be homeless, but he didn't have to look defeated. That's what Sarah would have said. His wife had believed in dignity, even when the medical bills started piling up like autumn leaves. Especially then. Cal tucked the shirt in, smoothed the wrinkles as best he could, and retrieved the shoebox from under the driver's seat. Inside, wrapped in an old handkerchief, was his Purple Heart. He'd earned it in Iraq, back when he was young enough to believe wars could be won cleanly. The medal felt heavier now than it had then. He held it for a moment, remembering the man he'd been, then carefully wrapped it again and returned it to its place. By 6:45, he was pulling out of the parking lot. The truck's engine coughed twice before catching. He needed $800 for repairs. The mechanic said couldn't wait much longer. $800 might as well have been $8,000. Cal drove through Chattanooga as the city woke. He passed the construction sites where he used to work, the diner where he and Sarah had celebrated their 20th anniversary, the hospital where she'd spent her final months. Every street held a memory. Every corner reminded him of what used to be. He'd lost Sarah 8 years ago. Cancer, swift and merciless, despite every treatment they'd thrown at it. Cal had worked 3 jobs trying to keep up with the bills. Roofing during the day, security guard at night, whatever odd jobs he could find on weekends. He'd thought if he could just earn enough, pay enough, somehow it would matter. But cancer doesn't negotiate with paychecks. After she died, the medical debt remained. Then the recession hit, and construction jobs dried up like creek beds in August. The house went first. The place where they'd raised Mia, where Sarah had planted roses every spring. Then his savings. Then his truck became his home. The worst part wasn't the poverty. It was watching his daughter grow distant. Mia had needed him during those final months with Sarah, and he'd been working, always working. She'd sat alone at the hospital while he framed houses, patched roofs, did anything to earn another $100 toward bills that never stopped coming. You chose money over her, Mia had said at the funeral. You chose it over us. He tried to explain. The treatments cost money, keeping the house meant money, everything required money he didn't have. But explanations sounded like excuses, and excuses sounded like failures, and eventually he'd stopped trying. Now Mia was 34, working the front desk at a budget hotel, raising 9-year-old Jessie alone. The father had left when Jessie was 2. Cal had offered to help, but Mia's pride, inherited from him, he supposed, made her refuse. She'd rather struggle alone than accept anything from the man who'd failed her mother. Cal saw his grandson sometimes, from a distance. He'd park across from Jesse's school and watch the boy play at recess. Jesse had Sarah's smile. It broke Cal's heart every time. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon, while Cal was sitting in the public library. He came here most days. It was warm, had bathrooms, and the librarians had stopped asking questions years ago. The number was unfamiliar, but he answered anyway. "Mr. Monroe, this is Margaret Hartwell. I'm an attorney in Nashville. I'm calling regarding the estate of Vernon Monroe." Cal's mind went blank for a moment. Vernon Monroe. The name was familiar but distant, like something from a half-remembered dream. "Vernon was your second cousin," Margaret continued. "He passed away 6 months ago. According to our records, you're his closest living relative." Cal remembered now, a family reunion in 1987, somewhere in Middle Tennessee. Vernon had been there, a quiet man in his 50s who'd kept to himself. They talked briefly about fishing, about the mountains. Cal had liked him but never saw him again. "I'm sorry to hear he passed," Cal said carefully. "Mr. Monroe, Vernon left you his property, a cabin and 5 acres in Ironwood, Tennessee. I have the deed and keys here. When would you be available to come by my office?" A cabin, property, the words felt foreign. Cal had nothing, and now he had land. That evening he drove to Mia's apartment complex. The building was old, but she kept her third-floor unit as nice as limited income allowed. He climbed the stairs slowly, rehearsing what he'd say. It had been 4 months since they'd spoken. Mia answered the door with Jesse beside her. She was tired. Cal could see it in the way she held her shoulders, the lines around her eyes that hadn't been there a few years ago. The hotel job paid barely enough for rent and groceries. She was one emergency away from the kind of poverty Cal knew too well. "Dad!" Her voice was neutral, guarded. "Hi, sweetheart. Jesse." The boy looked up at him with curious eyes. Cal's heart ached. His grandson was 9 years old, and they were practically strangers. "What do you need?" Mia asked. "Can I come in?" "Just for a minute. I have something to tell you." She hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was small but clean. Jesse's drawings covered the refrigerator. School papers were stacked neatly on the counter. Mia was doing her best, but Cal could see the strain. The furniture was worn. The walls needed paint. This wasn't a home. It was survival. He told her about Vernon, about the cabin, about the inheritance. A cabin in the middle of nowhere? Mia shook her head. "Dad, I have a job. Jesse has school. It's just," Cal struggled for words. "It's a roof. 4 walls. Maybe we could fix it up. Maybe it could be something." "We." Mia's voice sharpened. "There's no we, Dad. There hasn't been for a long time." Cal looked at Jesse, then back at his daughter. "Your landlord raised the rent. I heard you on the phone when I knocked." Mia's jaw tightened. "You were listening? $300 more a month, Mia. Where are you going to find that?" She didn't answer because they both knew there was nowhere. She was already working extra shifts, already choosing between groceries and utilities some months. "1 month," Cal said quietly. "Come look at it with me. If it's not livable, we walk away. But if there's any chance of what? Playing house? Pretending we're a family." The words stung, but Cal accepted them. He'd earned her anger. Jesse spoke up, his voice small. "Where is it, Grandpa?" "The cabin?" It was the first time Jesse had called him that. Cal's throat tightened. "In the mountains, buddy. In the little town called Ironwood. Are there really trees everywhere?" Jesse asked, his eyes brightening slightly. "Trees, streams, probably deer. Fresh air." Mia looked at her son, then at the apartment walls that seemed to press closer each month. Cal could see her calculating. The rent increase, the cramped space, Jesse growing up in a neighborhood where police sirens were the soundtrack to sleep. Finally, she exhaled. 1 month. We look at it, see if it's even standing. If it's a wreck, we come back. Understood? Cal nodded, not trusting his voice. "And Dad?" Mia met his eyes. "This doesn't fix anything between us. This is just practical." "I know," Cal said softly. "I know." The drive to Ironwood took 3 hours, winding through foothills that gradually became mountains. Fall had painted the landscape in shades of rust and gold. Cal drove while Mia sat in the passenger seat, her silence a wall between them. Jesse pressed his face to the window in the back, watching the world transform from strip malls and subdivisions to forest and stone. "Look, Mom, those trees are so tall." Mia's expression softened when she looked at her son. "They're beautiful, aren't they? Can we stop and see them up close?" "Maybe on the way back, honey." Cal caught her eye in the rearview mirror. For a moment, something passed between them. Not forgiveness, but perhaps the memory of easier times. When Jesse was a baby, before Mia's anger had hardened into a permanent barrier, Ironwood wasn't much more than a crossroads with a general store, a diner and a post office that doubled as the town hall. Population 847, according to the faded sign. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and newcomers were noted with polite curiosity. Margaret Hartwell's directions led them up a gravel road that wound deeper into the woods. The truck's suspension complained over the ruts and stones. After a mile, they reached a rusted mailbox, barely visible beneath overgrown vines. "This is it," Cal said quietly. The cabin sat in a clearing surrounded by oak and pine trees. It was worse than Cal had imagined. The porch sagged in the middle, held up by cinder blocks that had shifted over the years. Kudzu vines had claimed the entire east wall, crawling up toward the rusted metal roof. Several windows were broken, their glass long since scattered. The whole structure leaned slightly, as if exhausted from the effort of remaining upright. Mia stared at it, her mouth a tight line. "You cannot be serious." Cal searched for something honest to say. "It's standing, barely." She turned to him, anger flashing in her eyes. "This is what you dragged us here for. This falling down shack." Jesse climbed out of the truck, his sneakers crunching on the gravel. Despite the cabin's condition, his face held wonder. "It's like a fort, Mom, like in the movies." "Jesse, get back in the truck. Can I just look inside, please?" Cal understood his daughter's fury, but he also understood the boy's curiosity. "Let's at least see what we're dealing with," he said. "We drove 3 hours?" Mia's jaw clenched, but she nodded sharply. "Fine, 5 minutes. Then we leave." Cal approached the porch carefully, testing each board before putting his full weight on it. The wood groaned but held. The front door was unlocked, probably had been for years. He pushed it open, hinges screaming in protest. Inside, dust motes danced in the shafts of light that pierced the gloom. The cabin consisted of 3 small rooms, a main living area with a stone fireplace, a bedroom barely large enough for a double bed, and a kitchen with an ancient wood stove. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. Mouse droppings littered the floor. Water damage had left brown stains across the ceiling, but the bones were solid. The logs that formed the walls were thick and sound. The stone fireplace was intact. The roof had leaks but wasn't caved in. It was salvageable, barely, but salvageable. Mia stood in the doorway, arms crossed. No electricity, no running water. "I saw an outhouse out back. Dad, we can't live here." "We could fix it," Cal said, hearing the uncertainty in his own voice. "With what money? What tools? What expertise?" She was right, of course. But looking around this broken place, Cal saw possibility. He saw a project. He saw a reason to wake up that wasn't just survival. 1 week, he said. "Give me 1 week. I'll get the windows covered, the worst leaks patched. If we can't make it livable, we go back to Chattanooga. And where will Jesse and I stay during this week?" "There's a motel in the next town over." "It's with what money, Dad?" Mia's voice cracked. "I'm already behind on bills. I can't afford a motel." They stood in the dusty cabin, the gulf between them as wide as ever. Then Jesse's voice came from the bedroom. "Grandpa! There's furniture under these sheets. And look, someone left books." Cal walked into the bedroom. Jesse had pulled the sheet off an old dresser. On top sat a stack of books, their covers faded but intact. Field guides to Tennessee wildlife, a collection of Frost poems, a history of the Smoky Mountains. "Vernon must have liked to read," Cal said softly. Jesse opened one of the field guides, studying a picture of a white-tailed deer. "Do you think we'll see one?" "I think there's a good chance." Mia appeared in the doorway. She looked at her son's face, at the first real spark of interest she'd seen in months. Jesse had been struggling in school, withdrawing into himself. The apartment was too small, the neighborhood too harsh for a boy who needed space to grow. 1 week, she said finally. But I need to go back to Chattanooga tonight. Work tomorrow. Jesse has school. I understand. And Dad? She met his eyes. Don't make promises you can't keep. Not to him. That evening, after driving Mia and Jesse to the motel and then back to Chattanooga, Cal returned to the cabin alone. He'd stopped at the general store for supplies, a camping lantern, basic cleaning materials, a gallon of water. The woman at the counter, name tag reading Ruth, had been friendly. You must be Vernon's cousin, she'd said. News travels fast in Ironwood. I'm sorry for your loss. He was a good man. Did you know him well? As well as anyone, I suppose. He kept to himself mostly. Came to the diner once a week for coffee. Never caused trouble. Cal slept in his truck that first night, parked beside the cabin. When morning came, he started cleaning. Room by room, he swept out debris, wiped down surfaces, assessed what needed fixing. The work felt good, purposeful in a way nothing had felt for years. Round noon, he heard a vehicle approaching. An old Chevy pickup parked beside his truck, and a man climbed out. He was in his 70s, lean and weathered, moving with the careful economy of someone who'd learned to respect his aging joints. Help you? Cal called out. Name's Boone Carlyle. Lived down the road about a quarter mile. Heard Vernon's kin had arrived. They shook hands. Boone's grip was firm, but not aggressive. The handshake of a man who had nothing to prove. Cal Monroe. Figured. You got the look of the Monroe line. Vernon and I were neighbors for near about 15 years. Served in Vietnam together, actually. Different units, but we recognized the service in each other when he moved out here. I didn't know him well, Cal admitted. Met him once at a family reunion back in '87. He was a quiet soul. Kept his own counsel. But he was a good neighbor. The kind who'd show up with his toolbox if you needed help, but never stayed long enough to make you feel obligated. Boone looked at the cabin. Place needs work. It does. Winter comes early up here in the mountains. You'll want that roof sealed before the first snow. Cal nodded, feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of the task. Boone seemed to sense his mood. Tell you what, I got extra tarps in my shed. Some tools you might need. Vernon helped me with my barn roof a few years back. I'd like to return the favor if you're willing. The kindness caught Cal off guard. They don't have much to pay you with. Did I ask for payment? Boone's eyes crinkled. That's not how things work up here. You help your neighbor. Someday, you'll help someone else. That's the currency that matters. They spent the afternoon working together, Boone showing Cal which repairs were urgent and which could wait. They covered the broken windows with plywood, nailed tarps over the worst spots in the roof, and cleared the debris from around the foundation. As the sun began to set, Boone packed up his tools. You'll want to look at that kitchen floor soon. Looks soft to me. Might be rotted through. I'll check it tomorrow. Good man. You need anything? I'm just down the road. White house with the green shutters. Can't miss it. After Boone left, Cal sat on the porch steps as darkness gathered. The forest came alive with evening sounds, crickets, a distant owl, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. Stars began appearing overhead, more than he'd seen in years. The city lights of Chattanooga had drowned them out. He thought about Mia's anger, about Jesse's wonder, about this broken cabin that somehow felt more like home than anywhere he'd been since Sarah died. Tomorrow he'd tackle the kitchen floor. Tomorrow he'd keep working. For the first time in 3 years, Cal Monroe went to sleep believing tomorrow might actually be different. The kitchen floor felt spongy under Cal's weight. He'd noticed it the first day, but had been putting off the inevitable. The boards would need replacing. 3 days into his week alone at the cabin, he finally confronted the problem. Each step toward the ancient wood stove produced an ominous creak. Cal knelt and pressed his palm against the worn planks. They gave slightly, like pressing on old bread. Water damage, probably decades of it. He'd need to pull them up, see what was underneath, replace whatever had rotted through. He started near the back corner, where the damage looked worst. The first board came up easily, too easily. The nails had rusted through, offering no resistance. Beneath it he expected to see dirt or a crawl space. Instead, his flashlight beam revealed more wood. Cal frowned. He pried up another board, then another. The entire kitchen floor appeared to be built over a second floor. Strange construction, but old cabins sometimes had odd layouts. He continued working, stacking the damaged boards outside. By midday, he'd cleared half the kitchen. That's when he saw it, a seam in the underlying wood, too straight to be natural. He traced it with his fingers, a rectangular outline roughly 3 feet by 4 feet. In the center, a heavy iron ring lay flush with the surface. A hatch. Cal's pulse quickened. He cleared away the remaining boards above it, revealing the full outline. The hatch was sealed with a padlock, its metal surface covered in rust and grime. He tried the ring, but it wouldn't budge. The lock mechanism was frozen solid. He sat back on his heels, staring at the discovery. Why would Vernon, or whoever built this cabin, install a sealed hatch under the kitchen floor? The sound of Boone's truck interrupted his thoughts. His neighbor appeared in the doorway, carrying a thermos of coffee and a paper bag. Thought you might be hungry. Ruth sent sandwiches from the diner. Boone stopped when he saw the floor. Well, I'll be. Is that what I think it is? A hatch. Sealed shut. Boone set down his offerings and knelt beside Cal, examining the lock. This has been here a long time. Decades, judging by the rust. Any idea why? Root cellar, maybe? Folks used to store preserves, vegetables, keep things cool in summer. But Boone's voice held uncertainty. Though that padlock seems like overkill for potatoes. Can we open it? Not without bolt cutters. That lock's not giving up without a fight. Boone stood, brushing dust from his knees. I've got a pair in my shed. Give me 20 minutes. While Boone was gone, Cal ate one of Ruth's sandwiches and stared at the hatch. His mind spun with possibilities. A root cellar made sense, but something felt off. The careful concealment, the heavy lock, someone had wanted whatever was down there to stay hidden. Boone returned with industrial bolt cutters and a crowbar. We'll get her open. Stand back a bit, this lock's likely to put up a fight. It took 3 attempts. On the third, the lock's shackle snapped with a sharp crack. Boone tossed the ruined lock aside and pulled the iron ring. The hatch resisted, sealed by time and rust, but finally gave way with a groan. A waft of stale air emerged, carrying the scent of old wood and dust. Cal shone his flashlight into the opening. Wooden stairs descended into darkness. The space below appeared dry, which surprised him given the kitchen floor's condition. You want me to go first? Boone offered. Cal shook his head. It's my cabin, my responsibility. The stairs creaked under his weight but held firm. He counted 12 steps down, and then his feet touched solid ground. The flashlight beam swept across the space. A basement, roughly 12 feet by 15 feet. And it was full. Wooden crates lined the walls, stacked 2 and 3 high. Each crate was marked with numbers and letters that meant nothing to Cal. In the corner sat a leather trunk, its surface mottled with age. The air was remarkably dry, almost preserved, as if the space had been sealed against time itself. What do you see? Boone called from above. Crates. A lot of them. Cal approached the nearest stack. The crates were built solidly, nailed shut. He worked the crowbar under the lid of the top crate and levered it up. The wood splintered but gave way. Inside, wrapped in yellowed cloth and protective paper, was a painting. Cal carefully lifted it out, his hands trembling slightly. Even under the dust and wrapping, he could see the quality of the frame, the careful way it had been protected. He removed enough wrapping to see the image, a solitary house on a hillside, rendered in stark, lonely detail. Boone, you need to come down here. His neighbor descended carefully, taking in the scene. When he saw the painting, his expression changed. That's a Hopper. Edward Hopper. My wife, God rest her, she loved his work. We saw an exhibition in Nashville once. You're sure? About as sure as I can be without an expert. The style, the subject, it's his work. Boone looked at the other crates. What else is down here? They spent the next 2 hours carefully opening crates. Each one contained paintings, all meticulously wrapped and protected. Cal recognized some names from museum visits with Sarah, Andrew Wyeth, Georgia O'Keeffe. Others were unfamiliar, but the quality was unmistakable. One crate contained something different, manila envelopes filled with paper. Boone opened one carefully and whistled low. These are bearer bonds. What's that mean? Means they're as good as cash to whoever holds them. No names attached. See here? He pointed to the denomination printed on the bond. $10,000. And this one's 50,000. Cal's mind reeled. He opened another crate and found a leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with elegant handwriting. Names, dates, amounts, all meticulously recorded. The entries spanned decades, from the 1920s through the 1960s. One name appeared repeatedly in the margins: A.M. Adelaide Monroe. Vernon never mentioned this? Cal asked. Boone shook his head slowly. Never said a word. But then Vernon wasn't much for talking about his past. He was content with his simple life up here. This isn't simple. This is... Cal couldn't finish the sentence. The implications were too enormous. This is something you need to handle carefully, Boone said firmly. These paintings, if they're authentic, they're worth considerable money. And those bonds, depending on when they mature, how the interest compounds, could be worth millions. We need to call someone. A lawyer, an expert. That lawyer who contacted you about the inheritance. Hartwell, was it? Start there. But Cal, Boone met his eyes. Don't tell anyone else about this yet. Not until you understand what you've got and what your rights are. That night, Cal drove back to Chattanooga. He found Mia just getting off her shift at the hotel, her face drawn with exhaustion. Dad, what are you doing here? Did something happen? We need to talk. Can I buy you coffee? They sat in a 24-hour diner, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since morning. Cal told her everything, the hatch, the basement, the paintings and bonds. Mia listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from skepticism to disbelief. You're telling me there's potentially millions of dollars hidden under a kitchen floor? I don't know what it's worth. But yes, there's something valuable down there. Someone hid it deliberately. We can't tell anyone. The words came out fast. Not yet. Boone already knows. Anyone you trust? Cal nodded. With my life. Mia's hands wrapped around her coffee mug, knuckles white. This could change everything. Jesse's future, college. We have to do this right, Cal interrupted gently. Legal. Proper. We document everything, authenticate everything, make sure it actually belongs to us before we make any plans. For the first time in years, Mia looked at him with something other than anger. You're right. We do this by the book. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the discovery settling between them. Jesse keeps asking about the cabin, Mia said quietly. He wants to know when we can go back. The weekend? I've got the windows sealed, roof patched. It's rough, but it's safe enough for a visit. He drew pictures of it at school. His teacher said it's the most enthusiastic he's been about anything all year. Cal felt his throat tighten. Mia, I know I can't fix the past, but maybe don't. She held up her hand. Let's just take this one step at a time, starting with figuring out what's in that basement. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. For now, it was enough. Margaret Hartwell's office occupied the second floor of a renovated building in downtown Nashville. She was in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and the sharp, assessing gaze of someone who'd seen too many inheritance disputes turn ugly. She listened to Cal's story without interruption, her pen moving steadily across a legal pad. "And you haven't removed anything from the property?" she asked when he finished. "Just took photographs. Boone suggested we document everything before touching it." Smart man. "These photographs, may I see them?" Cal handed over his phone. Margaret scrolled through the images, her expression growing more serious with each one. She paused on a photo of the Hopper painting, zooming in to examine the signature. "Mr. Monroe, if these are authentic, and I'm not qualified to make that determination, you're looking at something far beyond a simple inheritance. You need an art authentication expert, someone with credentials the courts will respect. Can you recommend someone?" Dr. Evelyn Chen at Vanderbilt. She specializes in American modernist art and provenance research. I've worked with her on estate cases before. She's thorough, honest, and her testimony holds up under scrutiny. Margaret made a note. "I'll also need to freeze the property legally until we establish clear ownership and valuation. No one touches anything until we understand what we're dealing with." "How long will this take?" "Authentication? Could be weeks or months, depending on the complexity. Some pieces might have clear provenance, others— She shook her head. Let's take this one step at a time. First we get Dr. Chen up there to examine the collection. Dr. Evelyn Chen arrived at the cabin 3 days later, driving a sensible sedan packed with equipment. She was younger than Cal expected, maybe 40, with black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the focused intensity of someone who lived for their work. Mia had taken a personal day from the hotel. She and Jessie arrived just as Evelyn was unpacking her cameras and documentation materials. Jessie immediately gravitated toward Boone, who'd shown up with tools to continue working on the cabin's exterior. "You must be the family," Evelyn said, shaking hands with Mia. "Margaret told me about the discovery. I'll be honest, when she first called I was skeptical. Hidden collections sound like fantasy. But those photographs—" She paused. "Those photographs suggest otherwise." Cal led her to the basement. Evelyn descended slowly, her flashlight sweeping across the crates. When she reached the bottom, she stood motionless for a long moment, taking in the scene. "My God," she whispered, "this is real." She spent the next hour carefully examining the paintings they'd already unwrapped, photographing each one from multiple angles, making notes in a leather journal. Her hands were steady, but Cal could see the excitement in her eyes. "This Hopper is authentic. I'd stake my reputation on it. The O'Keefe I'll need to verify, but the style is right. These Pollock sketches," she looked up at Cal. "Do you understand what you have here? Valuable paintings? Museum-quality pieces. Works that should be in collections, studied by scholars, seen by the public." She turned back to the crates. "How many more?" "We've opened maybe a quarter of them." They worked through the afternoon, Evelyn cataloguing each discovery. The leather trunk in the corner contained the bearer bonds, hundreds of them, in denominations ranging from $10,000 to $50,000. Evelyn photographed but didn't touch them. "You'll need a financial specialist for these," she said. "Someone who understands vintage securities and compound interest. Depending on the maturity dates, these could be worth—" She shook her head. "I don't even want to speculate. The ledger book proved the most interesting." Evelyn spent an hour examining its entries, cross-referencing names and dates with her phone. "Adelaide Monroe," she said finally. "Born 1889, died 1974. Does that name mean anything to you?" Cal shook his head. "I never heard it before finding that ledger." "She was married to Edmund Monroe. They owned an art gallery in New York City, Monroe Fine Arts on Madison Avenue. They dealt primarily in American artists during the 1920s and 30s. Edmund died in 1943. Adelaide—" Evelyn flipped through her notes. "The gallery closed in 1943, right after Edmund's death. Adelaide disappeared from public records until her death in a New York nursing home in 1974. "Edmund Monroe," Cal repeated. "That's my great-great-uncle. My grandmother mentioned him once or twice. Said he'd married well, moved to New York, made something of himself. He made more than something. He had excellent taste and timing. He championed artists who later became icons." Evelyn pulled out a photograph she'd found, tucked in the ledger, a sepia image of a couple standing in front of a storefront. "I believe this is Adelaide and Edmund." The photograph showed a dignified woman in her 40s and a serious-looking man in a three-piece suit. Behind them, gold lettering on a window read, "Monroe Fine Arts." Mia, who'd been listening from the stairs, descended to look at the photograph. "They look happy. They built something important," Evelyn said. "This ledger documents purchases, sales, exhibitions. They weren't just dealers, they were patrons. They helped struggling artists, bought works when no one else would. This collection represents their life's work. But why hide it?" Mia asked. "That's what we need to figure out." The last entry in this ledger is dated August 1941. It says, "War is coming. E says we must protect what we've built." Evelyn looked up. "Edmund died in 1943. Adelaide must have moved the collection here afterward." "Vernon," Cal said quietly. "She trusted Vernon to keep it safe." Upstairs, Jessie's laughter drifted through the floorboards. He and Boone were working on the porch railing. The sound seemed at odds with the weight of history they were uncovering below. Over the next week, the cabin transformed. While Evelyn continued her authentication work, cataloguing each piece with meticulous care, Cal and Mia worked on repairs. They fell into a rhythm, Cal handling the heavy work, Mia cleaning and organizing. They didn't talk much, but the silence felt less hostile than before. Jesse helped where he could, handing Cal nails, sweeping sawdust, drawing pictures of the cabin's progress. Boone became a constant presence, teaching Jesse the names of trees and showing him how to read animal tracks in the mud. One evening, after Jesse had fallen asleep on a pile of sleeping bags, Cal and Mia sat on the newly repaired porch steps. The forest had settled into its night rhythms, crickets, the distant call of a barred owl, wind moving through the pines. "He's different here," Mia said quietly. "Happier. It's good for boys to have space to run. He never had a grandfather. I kept that from him." Her voice caught. "I was so angry at you that I punished him too." Cal wanted to reach for her hand, but didn't dare. "You had reason to be angry." "I did." "I do," she paused. "But I'm starting to see things differently. Pom's medical bills, losing the house, you working all those jobs. I thought you were choosing work over us. But you were trying to save us, the only way you knew how. I should have been there more. I should have sat with her, held her hand instead of framing someone else's house. Maybe, but you were there in the way you could be. I wasn't fair to that." They sat in silence, years of hurt beginning to ease between them. "Dad?" Mia's voice was soft. "Do you think Vernon knew?" "About the collection?" "I don't know. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he never looked. Or maybe he was protecting it just like Adelaide asked. What do we do with it? If it's really worth what Evelyn thinks?" Cal looked up at the stars. The same stars he'd slept under in his truck, the same stars that had watched him fail and struggle. "We do what's right, whatever that turns out to be." Inside, Jesse stirred in his sleep, murmuring something about deer. The cabin creaked and settled around them, holding its secrets, offering its shelter. For the first time in longer than Cal could remember, he felt like he might be building towards something, instead of just surviving the aftermath of loss. Evelyn returned 2 weeks later with Marcus Webb, a historian who specialized in World War II's impact on the American home front. They worked carefully, removing the backing from the largest painting, a sweeping Wyeth landscape that had been meticulously protected. Behind the canvas backing, pressed between layers of wax paper, was a letter. The paper was yellowed but intact, the handwriting elegant and precise. Evelyn read it aloud, her voice steady but touched with emotion. "To whoever finds this, I pray it is family, someone who will understand what Edmund and I tried to build. My husband died 3 months ago. His heart, the doctors said, but I know it was grief. Grief for the world tearing itself apart. Grief for the artists we could no longer help. Grief for the future we'd planned that would never come. Edmund was Jewish, though we never spoke of it openly. His family had changed their name generations ago, hoping to slip quietly into American life. But as the war in Europe grew worse, as reports of what was happening reached us, Edmund became afraid. Not for himself, he was too proud for that, but for what we'd built together. There were whispers, accusations. Other gallery owners, jealous of our success, began suggesting our collection might contain pieces that didn't belong to us. It wasn't true. Every work was purchased legitimately, but truth matters less than perception when fear takes hold. When Edmund died, I knew I couldn't keep the gallery open. The debts were crushing and the questions, they never stopped. So I made a choice. I would protect what we'd built, even if it meant hiding it away. Edmund's cousin Vernon promised to help. He owns land in Tennessee, far from the city's suspicious eyes. He's a good man, trustworthy in ways that have become rare. If you're reading this, Vernon has either passed on or can no longer remember. Forgive him and forgive me. We tried to do what was right in a world that made righteousness difficult. These paintings represent more than money. They represent faith, faith that beauty matters, that art can elevate the human spirit, that struggling artists deserve champions. Edmund believed this until his last breath. I believe it still. Do with this collection what your conscience dictates. But please honor what it represents. Honor the artists who created these works. Honor the belief that art belongs to everyone, not just the wealthy. With hope for a kinder future, Adelaide Munro. December 1943. The basement fell silent after Evelyn finished reading. Cal felt the weight of Adelaide's words, the burden of her trust reaching across 80 years. Marcus spoke first. This explains much. The timing, the secrecy, it all makes sense now. Anti-Semitic sentiment was real, even in America. Gallery owners were investigated, collections scrutinized. Edmund's death left Adelaide vulnerable, but she said every piece was purchased legitimately, Mia said. And I believe her, Evelyn replied. The ledger supports it. Every acquisition is documented, dates, amounts, provenance. This is meticulous record-keeping. But in 1943, being thorough didn't always matter. Suspicion was enough. Over the following weeks, Evelyn continued her authentication work. She confirmed 23 paintings as genuine. The Hopper, the Wyeth, several Pollock sketches, the O'Keeffe, and others by artists Cal had never heard of, but which Evelyn assured him were significant. Conservative estimate? Evelyn said during one of their meetings. The paintings alone are worth about $127 million. Some could go higher at auction depending on market conditions. Cal sat down heavily. $127 million. The number was incomprehensible. And the bonds? Mia asked. That's where it gets interesting. Evelyn pulled out a report from a financial specialist Margaret had consulted. Depending on maturity dates and compound interest, these bonds could be worth anywhere from $13 to $20 million. We'll need to have them officially evaluated, but, she paused, you're looking at a total collection value exceeding $140 million. Boone, who'd been listening quietly, whistled low. That's a considerable responsibility. It is, Evelyn agreed. Which brings us to the complicated question, what do you want to do with it? Cal looked at his daughter. They'd talked about this late at night on the cabin porch, weighing possibilities. They should be in museums, Cal said quietly. People should see them, Evelyn smiled. That's what I hoped you'd say, but Mia was frowning. Dad, this is our chance. We'd never have to worry about money again. Jessie could go to any college, have every opportunity. I know. Then why would we just give it away? I didn't say give it away. I said museums. There are ways to... Cal struggled for words. Adelaide and Edmund believed art should elevate people. All people. How do we honor that if we just sell everything to private collectors? By providing for our family, Mia shot back. By making sure Jessie never goes without. By giving him the life you couldn't give me. The words stung, but Cal understood her fear. She'd lived on the edge too long, watched opportunities slip away for lack of money. The idea of turning away from wealth must have seemed insane. What if we could do both? Evelyn suggested carefully. Donate some pieces to museums, sell others through proper channels. The tax benefits of donations alone would be significant, and there are ways to structure things so the family benefits while still honoring the spirit of the collection. Mia crossed her arms. I need to think about this. She left the cabin, and Cal heard his truck start a moment later. Jessie looked up from his drawing, concerned. Is Mom mad? She's scared, Cal said honestly. Sometimes those feel the same. That evening, Cal sat alone in the basement, Adelaide's letter in his hands. He understood his daughter's position, but he also understood what it meant to have nothing. He'd lived in his truck for 3 years, and it hadn't killed him. Poverty was hard, but it wasn't fatal. What killed you was losing purpose, losing the sense that your life meant something beyond survival. This collection was purpose. It was bigger than money, bigger than comfort. It was a chance to finish something beautiful that had been left unfinished. Meanwhile, word had spread through Ironwood. Ruth asked careful questions when Cal stopped at the diner. Other townspeople watched the cabin with open curiosity. Boone warned him that privacy was becoming impossible. Small towns talk, Boone said, and the talk is getting creative. I heard someone say you found gold bars. Another claimed it was Civil War treasure. It's none of their business, true enough, but you might want to consider security. That cabin's isolated. Someone desperate or foolish might decide to take a look for themselves. The threat became real 2 nights later. Cal woke to the sound of breaking glass. He grabbed the flashlight he kept by his sleeping bag and rushed outside. A figure was running toward the tree line, too far away to identify, too fast to catch. The kitchen window had been smashed, the plywood covering torn aside. Nothing had been taken. The intruder had probably panicked when Cal woke, but the message was clear. The secret was out, and not everyone had good intentions. Boone arrived within minutes of Cal's phone call, shotgun in hand. They searched the perimeter but found nothing except tire tracks on the access road. "You need better security," Boone said firmly, "and maybe you need to consider moving that collection somewhere safer until this is resolved." Cal called Margaret the next morning. Within 2 days, arrangements had been made to move the most valuable pieces to a secure facility in Nashville. A bonded transport company, insurance, climate-controlled storage. The logistics were complex and expensive, but Margaret assured him it was necessary. The day the collection was moved, Cal felt both relief and loss. The basement looked empty without the crates, hollow. Jesse stood in the space, turning slowly. "It's like the treasure was never here," the boy said softly. "It was here," Cal assured him, "and it'll come back one way or another." But even as he said it, Cal wondered if that was true. Once things left, they had a way of never quite returning the same. The letter from Roland Pierce's attorney arrived 3 weeks after the collection was moved to secure storage. Margaret called Cal immediately, her voice tight with concern. "We have a problem. Someone's contesting your ownership of the collection." Cal drove to Nashville that afternoon. In Margaret's office, she laid out the documents. Roland Pierce, 58, was Adelaide's great-nephew through her sister's line. He'd produced Adelaide's last will and testament, dated 1973, 1 year before her death. "The will is vague," Margaret explained. "Most of it deals with her personal effects, some small bequests. But there's this clause," she pointed to a paragraph near the end. "It says, 'My artistic legacy should benefit those who understand its value.' What does that mean? That's the problem. It's ambiguous. Pierce's lawyer argues it means the collection should go to someone qualified to appreciate it, namely their client, who's an art history professor at a small college in Connecticut. They're claiming Adelaide intended the collection for someone with expertise, not," Margaret hesitated, "not a homeless veteran who knows nothing about art," Cal finished. "Their words, not mine. But yes, that's their position." Mia, who'd driven up separately, leaned forward. "Can they do this? Can they just claim it? They can try. Whether they'll succeed is another matter." Cal inherited the property through Vernon, who inherited from Adelaide. The chain of ownership is clear, but this will clause creates ambiguity. A judge might decide Pierce has standing. "What does Pierce want?" Cal asked. "Everything, the entire collection. He's arguing that as Adelaide's blood relative with relevant expertise, he's the rightful heir to her artistic legacy." Margaret pulled out another document. "He's also deeply in debt, lost his tenure-track position last year, owes back taxes, facing foreclosure. This isn't about honoring Adelaide's wishes, it's about money." The realization settled over Cal like a weight. This man wanted to take what Adelaide and Edmund had built and sell it off piece by piece to save himself. Over the next few days, something unexpected happened. Ironwood rallied. Ruth organized a fundraiser at the diner, a legal defense fund for Cal. She put out a jar with a simple sign, "For our neighbor." Within a week, it held nearly $3,000 in small bills and coins. Daniel Reeves, a local contractor who'd been helping with the cabin repairs, offered to testify about Cal's character and the care he'd taken with the property. Other townspeople came forward with similar offers. Boone became Cal's most vocal defender. "Vernon chose Cal for a reason," he told anyone who'd listen. "He could have left that property to anyone. He left it to someone he trusted, even though they'd only met once. That says something about Cal's character." But the strongest support came from an unexpected source. Mia had been quiet since Pierce's challenge, spending long hours alone. Cal worried she was pulling away again, retreating into the anger that had defined their relationship for so many years. Then one evening, she asked him to walk with her around the property. They followed the old deer trail that led to a creek, their footsteps quiet on the pine needles. "I've been thinking about what you said," Mia began. "About the paintings belonging in museums. About honoring what Adelaide wanted. I know you disagree." "I did. I wanted the money, wanted it so badly I could taste it. Jessie's future, my future, finally being able to breathe without worrying about rent and bills." She paused. "But then I read Adelaide's letter again, really read it." They reached the creek, where water ran clear over smooth stones. Mia picked up a pebble and tossed it into the current. She was protecting something bigger than money. She and Edmund built something that mattered, and when the world got cruel and suspicious, she chose to hide it rather than let it be destroyed or scattered. Mia turned to Cal. "Yesterday, Jessie asked me what we'd do with all that money if we got it, and I realized I didn't have a good answer. Buy a house, pay for college, save the rest. That's it. That's all I could think of. Those are good things. They're small things, safe things. They're not—" She struggled for words. "They're not legacy. They're not art that changes how people see the world. They're just comfort." Cal felt his throat tighten. "You don't have to give up comfort for my principles." "Maybe not, but maybe I want my son to grow up knowing his family did something meaningful, something bigger than just surviving." She met his eyes. "I want to fight Pierce. I want to win, and then I want to figure out how to honor Adelaide and Edmund's dream while still making sure Jessie has opportunities. There has to be a way to do both." "There might be. Then let's find it. Together." It was the first time Mia had said together in 8 years. Cal pulled her into a hug, and she let him, her arms wrapping around him in return. Margaret worked tirelessly on their defense. She discovered Adelaide's journals at a New York Historical Society, personal writings that detailed her and Edmund's philosophy about art. "Listen to this entry from 1936, Margaret said during one of their meetings. She read from a photocopy. "Edmund believes, and I agree, that art belongs to everyone. We must preserve for appreciation, not profit. The wealthy can always access beauty, but what of the poor? What of the children in tenements who never see a painting? This is our calling, to bring beauty to those who need it most," Evelyn found. Additional evidence. Exhibition records from a 1935 show Adelaide had curated called Art for the People. Free admission, educational programs, guided tours for school groups. Adelaide's documented commitment to public access to art strengthened their case. But Pierce's lawyers pushed back hard. They questioned Cal's competence, his fitness to manage such valuable assets. They pointed to his bankruptcy, his years of homelessness, his lack of education or expertise. How can a man who couldn't manage his own finances be trusted with a $140 million collection? Pierce's lead attorney argued in preliminary filings. The attacks hurt because they were rooted in truth. Cal had failed financially. He had lost everything. He wasn't qualified by any traditional measure. But something had changed in him. The cabin, the work, the purpose. They'd given him something back. Not just hope, but determination. He wasn't the same man who'd been sleeping in his truck 6 months ago. Late one night, Cal and Mia sat on the finished porch. The cabin had transformed. New roof, sealed windows, fresh paint. Daniel's crew had worked for reduced rates, and Cal and Mia had done what they could themselves. It was becoming a home. "I'm sorry I wasn't there when Mom was dying," Cal said quietly. Mia was silent for a long moment. "I'm sorry I shut you out instead of letting you grieve with me. I should have made different choices. We both should have." She reached over and took his hand. "But we're here now. That's what matters." Jessie appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Can't sleep. Too many cricket noises." Cal smiled. "Come sit with us, buddy." The boy settled between them, and they sat together under the stars. Inside the cabin, Adelaide's letter lay in a drawer, waiting. The collection sat in storage, waiting. The legal battle loomed ahead, uncertain and daunting. But in that moment, on that porch, they were a family. Broken and rebuilding, scarred but healing. Whatever the court decided, they had this. They had each other, and sometimes Cal thought that was the real treasure worth fighting for. 3 days before the preliminary hearing, Jesse was playing in the cabin with a rubber ball Boone had given him. He threw it against the bedroom wall, catching it on the rebound, a simple game he'd played 100 times. This time, the ball bounced at an odd angle and hit the wall hard. The sound was wrong, hollow, echoing, not the solid thud of log against rubber. "Grandpa?" Jesse called. "Something's weird with this wall." Cal had been in the kitchen, reviewing legal documents Margaret had sent. He walked into the bedroom, where Jesse was pressing his hand against the wall. "Here, listen," Jesse knocked. The sound was distinctly hollow. Cal ran his fingers along the log, searching for seams. Then he found it, a barely visible line where one section of wall didn't quite match the rest. He pressed, and the panel shifted slightly. "Stand back, buddy." Cal worked carefully, finding the mechanism that held the false wall in place. When it finally gave way, it swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a narrow opening and stairs descending into darkness. A second basement. "Stay here," Cal said, but Jesse was already peering into the opening, eyes wide with excitement. "Is it more treasure?" "I don't know. Let me check first." Cal descended the steep stairs, flashlight in hand. This space was smaller than the first basement, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, but it was clearly personal. A writing desk sat against one wall, with an oil lamp and a simple wooden chair. Bookshelves lined another wall, filled with volumes on art, history, poetry. And on the desk, leather-bound and thick, was a diary. Cal opened it carefully. The handwriting was the same as Adelaide's letter, elegant, precise, unmistakably hers. The entries spanned decades, from 1940 to 1974. He turned to the final pages, dated just weeks before her death. His hands trembled as he read. The diary revealed everything. Vernon wasn't just Edmund's cousin. He was Edmund's half-brother. Edmund's father had an affair in 1910, and Vernon was the result. The family scandal had been carefully hidden. Vernon raised by relatives in Tennessee, while Edmund grew up in New York society. But the brothers had found each other as adults. Despite the shame their existence represented to the family, they'd formed a deep bond. Vernon was the one person Edmund trusted completely. Adelaide's final entries were heartbreaking. She'd changed her will specifically to leave everything to Vernon. But Vernon had been diagnosed with early-onset dementia in 1974. He'd never properly recorded his inheritance. When Adelaide died, her executor couldn't locate Vernon, and the estate had gone into probate, eventually dissolving. The Tennessee property, purchased in Vernon's name decades earlier, had never been connected to Adelaide's estate. Vernon's dementia worsened over the years. He'd lived in the cabin, but the disease had stolen his memories. He'd forgotten about the collection entirely, forgotten Adelaide's trust, forgotten everything except the peaceful life in the mountains. Cal read Adelaide's final entry, dated 3 weeks before her death. "I failed Edmund. I couldn't protect our legacy. The lawyers can't find Vernon, and I fear the collection will be lost forever. But perhaps that's as it should be. Perhaps someday, when the world is kinder, someone will find what we hid. Someone who will understand. Someone who will know what to do. Vernon, my dear brother-in-law, forgive me for the burden I placed on you. Your illness took you from us before you could fulfill our dream. But I trust that whoever inherits your land will have your good heart. They will know what to do. To whoever finds this, finish what we started. Let art elevate, educate, and inspire. Don't let our dream die with us." Cal sat in Adelaide's chair, overwhelmed by the weight of her words. Vernon had been meant to preserve the collection, but dementia had stolen that possibility. The secret had passed to Cal, not through intention, but through the random chance of inheritance law. Yet Adelaide had believed. Even knowing Vernon might never remember, she'd believed someone would find it. Someone would understand. Cal continued exploring the small room. Behind the desk, he found more paintings, smaller ones wrapped with extraordinary care. And one in particular made his breath catch, a Rothko. Small but unmistakable, the signature clear in the corner. Attached to the frame was a note in different handwriting, dated 1952, for Adelaide, who saw beauty when others saw only color. You and Edmund gave me hope when I had none. This is my gratitude, inadequate but sincere. Mark Rothko. Cal knew enough to understand what this meant. A personal gift from Rothko to Adelaide, given out of genuine friendship and appreciation. This wasn't just a valuable painting. It was a testament to the relationships Adelaide and Edmund had built with the artists they championed. He called Margaret immediately, then Evelyn. Within hours, they were at the cabin, carefully documenting the second basement's contents. Evelyn held the diary with reverence, reading through Adelaide's entries. This changes everything. The provenance documentation here is extraordinary. She recorded conversations with artists, details about acquisitions, her entire philosophy about art. She looked up at Cal. This isn't just a collection. It's a historical record of American art in a critical period. And Vernon? Cal asked. The diary proves he was supposed to inherit everything. That he was Edmund's half-brother. Margaret flipped through her notes. That strengthens your claim significantly. You inherited through Vernon, who was Adelaide's intended heir. Roland Pierce is merely a distant relative through Adelaide's sister. His connection is far weaker than yours. The Rothko was valued at potentially $45 to $50 million. Alone, it was worth more than everything Cal had ever earned in his entire life. That night, Mia read through Adelaide's diary, tears streaming down her face. She loved him so much. Edmund, you can feel it in every word. They built something together, Cal said. Something beautiful. And when he died, she protected it the only way she knew how. Vernon was supposed to finish it. But he couldn't remember. No, but we can. Cal met his daughter's eyes. We can finish what they started. Jessie, who'd been sitting quietly, spoke up. What will you do with the Rothko painting, Grandpa? Cal had been thinking about that all evening. I think we sell it. Use the money to fund a foundation, something that brings art to people who can't access it otherwise. One painting to save all the others. That seems fair, Jessie said with the simple wisdom of 9-year-olds. Mia reached over and squeezed Cal's hand. Adelaide would approve. They sat together in the cabin as night settled around them. Outside, the forest breathed and rustled. Inside, Adelaide's words waited in the diary. Edmund's dreams documented in careful handwriting, Vernon's trust, however forgotten, passed forward to a man who'd once had nothing. Cal understood now. This wasn't about luck or chance. This was about stewardship, about being worthy of trust, even when you didn't know it was being placed in you, about finishing what others started because it was the right thing to do. Tomorrow, they'd call Margaret with their plan. Tomorrow, they'd prepare for court with new evidence and renewed purpose. But tonight, they simply sat together, a family rebuilt from broken pieces, holding the dreams of the dead like precious, fragile things that must be protected at all costs. Margaret assembled their legal strategy around the diary and Edmund's sketchbook, another discovery from the second basement. The sketchbook contained Edmund's artistic vision, documented in careful drawings and notes spanning 17 years. On page after page, Edmund had sketched gallery layouts, exhibition plans, ideas for bringing art to underserved communities. In the margins, he'd written his philosophy in neat script. Art elevates the soul. Every soul deserves elevation. This is gold, Margaret said, photographing each page. Edmund's documented intentions, dated and detailed. He wanted to create a foundation that would bring art education to people who couldn't access it. The Depression derailed those plans, but the dream is all here in his own handwriting. Cal and Margaret crafted their response to Pierce's claim. They weren't just defending ownership, they were proposing a solution that honored Adelaide and Edmund's original vision, the Monroe Foundation for American Art Education. The collection would tour regional museums through rotating exhibitions. Proceeds from the Rothko sale and the bearer bonds would fund art education programs in rural schools. Cal would serve as executive director with a modest salary, enough to live on, not enough to profit from. The cabin becomes the foundation headquarters. Margaret explained to Evelyn and Marcus, who'd agreed to testify. The original basement becomes a climate-controlled gallery for small community exhibitions. The second basement is preserved as Adelaide's memorial room, open to researchers studying this period of American art history. Evelyn was enthusiastic. I can provide expert testimony about the collection's historical significance and how your proposal honors the documented intentions of Adelaide and Edmund. This is exactly what they would have wanted, Marcus added. I'll testify about the wartime context, why Adelaide felt compelled to hide the collection, how anti-Semitic sentiment affected Jewish gallery owners, even in America. It establishes the fear and love that motivated her actions, but Roland Pierce's legal team prepared their own attack. They questioned every aspect of Cal's fitness to manage such valuable assets. He's bankrupt. He was homeless for 3 years. He has no education beyond high school, no experience in art or museum management, no relevant qualifications whatsoever. Pierce's lead attorney laid it out in court filings. Adelaide's will specifically states her artistic legacy should benefit those who understand its value. My client has a doctorate in art history. He's published, he's taught, he's dedicated his life to art. Cal Monroe's only qualification is being related to someone who was related to Adelaide. The personal attacks cut deeper than Cal expected. His failures, the bankruptcy, the lost jobs, the years in the truck, were laid bare in legal documents filed with the court. Every mistake, every wrong turn, documented and cited as evidence of his unworthiness. Mia found him sitting on the porch one evening, the court filings in his lap, his face drawn. They're not wrong, Cal said quietly. I did fail. At everything they're saying. You didn't fail. You fell. There's a difference, is there? Mia sat beside him. You lost everything trying to save Mom, then you lost yourself in the grief. But you didn't give up. You kept going. You slept in your truck, but you still shaved every morning, kept your clothes clean, maintained your dignity. That's not failure, Dad. That's courage. Jesse's teacher had assigned an essay, My Family Hero. Jesse wrote about Cal, about rebuilding a broken cabin and a broken family, about learning that fixing things took patience and love, about his grandfather, who showed him it was never too late to start over. Mia wanted to submit it as part of their testimony. Cal resisted. He's 9 years old. This isn't his fight. He's already part of it. And his words, they say something the legal arguments can't. They say what kind of man you are. Margaret agreed. The judge needs to see you as a person, not just a defendant. Jesse's essay humanizes you. It shows what you've built here beyond just property, a family, a future, a purpose. The judge agreed to visit the property, a site inspection before the hearing. Cal spent days preparing, ensuring every detail reflected their intentions. The cabin was fully restored now, warm and welcoming. The basement gallery was set up with careful documentation of the collection's history. Adelaide's memorial room was arranged thoughtfully, her desk and diary displayed with respect. Judge Sarah Hendricks arrived on a cool Saturday morning. She was in her 60s, with the weathered demeanor of someone who'd presided over too many contentious cases. She walked through the property slowly, asking questions, taking notes. Tell me about Vernon Monroe, she said to Cal. What do you know about him? Not much. We met once when I was young. He seemed kind, quiet. Boone knew him better. Boone, who'd insisted on being present, stepped forward. Vernon was a good man, Your Honor, a veteran, like Cal here. He understood duty and honor. Toward the end, the dementia took his memories, but it never took his character. He would have wanted this collection preserved properly. The judge spent time in Adelaide's memorial room, reading entries from her diary. Cal watched her face, trying to gauge her thoughts, but she remained impassive. Before she left, she stood on the porch, looking out at the mountains. Mr. Monroe, why do you want this responsibility? You could fight for the collection, sell it, never worry about money again. Why choose the harder path? Cal considered the question carefully. Because I know what it's like to have nothing, Your Honor. To lose everything and wonder if tomorrow will be different. Art didn't feed me when I was hungry, but it fed something I didn't know was starving. Beauty reminds us that life is more than survival. Adelaide and Edmund knew that. They built something that mattered. Vernon protected it, even though he forgot why. I can't claim to be worthy of their trust, but I can try to honor it. The judge nodded slowly and left without further comment. The weekend before the hearing, the cabin filled with people who'd become family. Boone and Ruth, Daniel and his crew, Evelyn and Marcus, even some townspeople who'd contributed to the legal fund. They shared a meal, simple but abundant, and stories about the journey that had brought them all together. Jesse presented a drawing he'd made, the cabin surrounded by all of them, their names carefully printed below each figure. "The family we found," he titled it. Ruth wiped tears from her eyes. "That boy has wisdom beyond his years." That night, after everyone had left, Cal sat alone in Adelaide's memorial room. He opened her diary to a random page and read, "Edmund says I worry too much about legacy. We do our work, he tells me. We trust it will matter. But what if it doesn't? What if we're forgotten?" Cal understood her fear, the need to matter, to leave something behind that proved your life had meaning. He took out his own journal, one Margaret had suggested he keep during this process, and wrote his first entry. "Adelaide, I don't know if I'm the right person for this. I'm not educated, not qualified by any measure that matters to the world. But I promise to try. I promise to honor what you and Edmund built. And I promise to teach my family what you've taught me, that wealth isn't what we keep, but what we give away. That art belongs to everyone, that beauty matters, especially when everything else feels broken." He closed the journal and sat in the quiet, feeling the weight of the hearing ahead. Tomorrow they'd stand before the judge and make their case. Tomorrow they'd learn if trying was enough. The courthouse was 40 minutes from Ironwood, a stern brick building that had witnessed decades of disputes. The courtroom was small but packed. Townspeople from Ironwood had driven down to support Cal, Ruth, Daniel, others who'd contributed to the legal fund. They filled the gallery, a silent presence of community solidarity. Judge Sarah Hendricks entered precisely at 9. She was composed, her expression giving nothing away. Cal sat beside Margaret, Mia on his other side. In his jacket pocket, he carried Adelaide's wedding ring, found in her desk drawer with a note to Edmund. Margaret had suggested he might want it during testimony. Roland Pierce arrived with 2 lawyers in expensive suits. He was a thin man with graying hair and the pinched expression of someone carrying chronic worry. Cal felt an unexpected flash of sympathy. Pierce was desperate, drowning in debt, grasping at this collection like a life preserver, but desperation didn't make him right. Pierce's lead attorney opened with a methodical assault on Cal's character and qualifications. "Your Honor, the facts are simple. Cal Monroe was homeless for 3 years. He filed for bankruptcy twice. He has no education beyond high school, no experience in art or museum management, no credentials that would qualify him to oversee a collection valued at over $140 million. The attorney gestured toward Pierce. "My client, by contrast, holds a doctorate in art history from Yale. He's published extensively, taught at the university level, dedicated his entire professional life to art. Adelaide Monroe's will specifically states her artistic legacy should benefit those who understand its value." That clearly describes Dr. Pierce, not Mr. Monroe. Pierce took the stand. He spoke about his relationship to Adelaide. Distant, never having met her, but connected through blood. He detailed his academic credentials, his publications, his teaching experience. "What would you do with the collection?" Margaret asked during cross-examination. "Ensure proper management through established auction houses and museum partnerships. These are priceless works that deserve professional handling." "And you'd receive compensation for this management?" Pierce hesitated. "That's standard practice in estate management." "How much?" 40% of proceeds from sales." Margaret let that hang in the air. "Over $50 million by your calculation, for management services, for expertise and proper stewardship." "I see," Margaret made a note. "And which pieces would you sell?" "That would depend on market conditions and—" "All of them?" Pierce's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The courtroom had heard what mattered. Pierce intended to sell, to profit personally, to scatter Adelaide's carefully preserved collection to the highest bidders. Margaret called Evelyn Chen as their first witness. Evelyn detailed the collection's historical significance, explained Adelaide and Edmund's documented philosophy about art as public good. Dr. Chen, you've examined Edmund Munro's personal sketchbook. Can you tell the court what you found? Evelyn opened the sketchbook, now admitted as evidence. Edmund documented his dream of creating a foundation that would bring art to underserved communities. Here, on page 43, dated 1929, he writes, "The wealthy can always access beauty. We must bring beauty to those who cannot access it themselves." This wasn't idle musing, it was his life's purpose. She read more passages, each one reinforcing Edmund's belief that art belonged to everyone, not just the privileged. Judge Hendricks leaned forward, listening intently. Marcus Webb testified next, providing historical context. Adelaide hid this collection out of fear and love. Fear of what anti-Semitic sentiment might do to her husband's legacy. Love for what they'd built together. Her letter, found behind. One of the paintings explicitly states these works should be preserved for appreciation, not profit. Roland Pierce's attorney tried to diminish the letter's significance. These are old documents, Your Honor, noble sentiments but not legally binding directives, but they establish context and intent, Judge Hendricks said. I'll allow the testimony. Boone testified about Vernon's character, about the trust Vernon had placed in Cal without fully understanding why. Vernon might not have remembered what he was protecting, but he knew Cal was the kind of man worth protecting it for. There's wisdom in that, even through dementia's fog. The morning session ended with Pierce's team confident, Margaret cautiously hopeful. They broke for lunch and Cal found himself unable to eat. The weight of the afternoon, his own testimony, pressed down like a physical thing. Mia squeezed his hand. Just tell the truth, that's all you can do. The truth is they're right about me. I did fail. No, the truth is you're human. You struggled, you fell, but you got back up. That's what matters. When court reconvened, Judge Hendricks looked directly at Cal. Mr. Munro, are you ready to testify? Cal stood, his legs unsteady. He walked to the witness stand, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. As he settled into the chair, he felt Adelaide's wedding ring in his pocket, a reminder of why he was here, what he was fighting for. Margaret's questioning began gently, establishing his background, military service, construction work, marriage to Sarah, her illness, the crushing medical debt that had dismantled their life piece by piece. Tell the court about those 3 years in your truck, Margaret said softly. Cal took a breath. I lost everything. My wife, my home, my daughter's respect. I lived in a 2004 Ford F-150 parked behind a Walmart. I worked odd jobs when I could find them, stayed clean, kept my dignity as best I could. But I knew, his voice caught. I knew I'd failed. As a husband, as a father, I couldn't save Sarah, couldn't keep our home, couldn't be what my family needed. And then you inherited the cabin. Yes, from Vernon, a man I'd met once. I didn't understand why he'd leave it to me. I still don't really. But it was a chance to give my daughter and grandson a home, to maybe, Cal paused, to maybe find a way back to being someone worth knowing. The courtroom was silent, every eye on him. Margaret walked Cal through the discovery of the collection, his immediate instinct to document everything, his insistence on authentication and legal process. Then she reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small velvet box. Mr. Munro, what is this? Adelaide's wedding ring. We found it in her desk in the second basement. Margaret opened the box. The gold band gleamed under the courtroom lights, simple and elegant. She handed Cal a small card, the note that had accompanied it. Would you read this for the court? Cal's hands trembled as he unfolded the aged paper. Edmund, my love, until we meet again. This was only borrowed time. You were my eternity. The words caught in his throat. He thought of Sarah, of the years they'd had and the years they'd lost. He understood Adelaide's grief down to his bones. What was your first thought when you saw the paintings? Margaret asked gently. that they were too beautiful to be hidden, that someone had loved them enough to protect them through a war, through grief, through decades. I felt like, Cal struggled for words, I felt like I should do the same. You're not qualified, Dr. Pierce's attorneys argue. You have no degrees, no credentials. That's true. I'm not qualified like Professor Pierce. I don't have expertise or education. Cal looked at the judge. But I understand what Adelaide was protecting. Not money, not assets, love, and the things love creates. My wife Sarah believed in beauty, in kindness, in leaving things better than you found them. I failed her in many ways, but I learned from her. I learned that some things matter more than survival. Pierce's attorney rose for cross-examination, his expression sharp. Mr. Monroe, you filed for bankruptcy twice. Correct? Yes. You've been unemployed for 3 years. Cal paused. I've been unhoused. Not unemployed. There's a difference. Semantics. The fact remains, you couldn't manage your own finances. How can you be trusted to manage a $140 million collection? You're right. I couldn't manage my finances. I failed at that. I failed at a lot of things. Cal met the attorney's eyes. But I learned that managing wealth and understanding worth are different. I'm not asking to manage this alone. I'm proposing a foundation with experts, oversight, transparency. I'm just asking to be the steward, the person who makes sure Adelaide and Edmund's dream finally happens. You'd receive a salary. You'd benefit financially. $45,000 a year. Enough to live modestly and do the work. Not enough to profit. Cal leaned forward slightly. There's a difference between compensation and exploitation. The attorney pressed harder, trying to rattle him, but Cal remained steady. He'd lived through worse than hostile questions. He'd buried his wife, lost his home, watched his daughter's love turn to anger. This was just words. Finally, the attorney sat down. Margaret called Mia to the stand. Mia's testimony cut through the legal arguments like a knife. She spoke about their estrangement, the years of anger, the resentment that had calcified between them. I blame my father for not being there when my mother was dying, for choosing work over family, for failing us when we needed him most. Her voice was steady but emotional. But he was there, working 3 jobs to pay for treatments that didn't work, trying to save her the only way he knew how. I couldn't see that through my grief and anger. What changed? Margaret asked. The cabin. This journey, watching him rebuild something broken with patience and care. Mia pulled out Jesse's essay. My son wrote this for school. With the court's permission, I'd like to read it. Judge Hendricks nodded. Proceed? Mia's voice softened as she read Jesse's words, simple, honest, profound in their childlike clarity. The essay described Cal teaching Jesse to hammer nails, to identify trees, to read the stars. It talked about fixing broken things with patience and love. Grandpa says broken things can be fixed if you have patience and love. Our family was broken. Now we're fixed. That's better than money. The essay ended with a single line that made several people in the courtroom wipe their eyes. Grandpa is my hero because he shows me that it's never too late to start over. When Mia finished, the courtroom was silent. Even Pierce's attorneys looked uncomfortable. Judge Hendricks made notes, her expression still unreadable. Does the court have any other witnesses? She asked. Both sides rested. The judge reviewed her notes for a long moment. This is not a typical case. Both parties have made compelling arguments. Mr. Pierce brings credentials and expertise. Mr. Monroe brings intention and a proposal that appears to honor the documented wishes of Adelaide. And Edmund Monroe, she looked up. I'll review all materials and issue a ruling within 2 weeks. But I want to say, regardless of the legal outcome, this court appreciates the gravity with which both parties approach this matter. These are not just valuable objects. They represent human dreams, artistic legacy, and the question of how we honor the past while serving the future. She adjourned the court. Outside, townspeople surrounded Cal. Ruth hugged him fiercely. Boone gripped his shoulder. Daniel promised the cabin would be ready for whatever came next. Mia held Cal's hand as they walked to the parking lot. Jesse ran ahead, chasing a leaf blown by the wind, innocent and unburdened by the weight of adult concerns. You did well in there, Mia said quietly. We'll see. No matter what the judge decides, Mia stopped, turned to face him. I'm proud of you, Dad, for trying, for caring about doing the right thing, even when the easy thing would have been simpler. Jesse ran back, grabbed both their hands. Did you tell them about the stars, Grandpa? Did you tell them everything that matters? Cal lifted his grandson, held him close. I told them about everything that matters. They drove home as sunset painted the mountains gold and purple. The cabin waited, warm lights glowing in the windows. Inside, Adelaide's diary sat in its place of honor. The collection waited in storage, patient and timeless. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. And somehow, that felt like victory enough. 11 days felt like 11 years. Life continued at the cabin. Cal and Mia working on the final repairs, Jesse attending school in Ironwood, settling into routines that felt almost normal. But the waiting pressed on them like gathering weather. The call came on a Friday afternoon. Margaret's voice was warm. Cal, the judge has ruled. Can you come to my office? They drove to Nashville, the three of them silent with anticipation. In Margaret's office, she handed Cal the ruling with a smile that told him everything before he read the first word. You won. The judge's decision was thorough and thoughtful. Cal Monroe was recognized as legitimate heir to Vernon Monroe's estate, which included the collection. Roland Pierce's claim was denied. Adelaide's will clause was too vague to supersede established inheritance law. But Judge Hendricks had gone further. She'd commended Cal's proposed foundation, ordered oversight through a board of trustees, including art experts and community members, and stipulated that Cal could serve as executive director with an annual salary of $45,000. This court finds that Mr. Monroe's proposal best honors the documented intentions of Adelaide and Edmund Monroe, the ruling stated. Art should elevate, educate, and inspire, not enrich individuals beyond reasonable compensation. The Monroe Foundation for American Art Education is hereby recognized and approved. Outside the courthouse, a small group of reporters waited. Cal gave a brief statement, uncomfortable with the attention but understanding its necessity. This was never about me. It was about finishing something beautiful that was left unfinished. Adelaide and Edmund believed art could change lives. I've seen it change mine, my daughter, my grandson, our family. We were broken and this journey helped heal us. If we can share that with others, especially children who don't have access to art, then we've done something worthwhile. He took no questions, just walked to his truck, where Mia and Jesse waited. The celebration at Ruth's diner that evening brought out half of Ironwood. Toasts were made, pie was served, and Boone stood to speak. To Adelaide, Edmund, Vernon, and Cal, unlikely guardians of beauty, may their example remind us that stewardship matters more than ownership. In a quiet moment on the diner's porch, Daniel approached Mia. He'd been part of their journey from the beginning, helping with repairs, offering steady support without expectation. I know the timing might not be perfect, he said, but I was wondering, would you consider having dinner with me? A real date, not just working on the cabin together? Mia smiled, the first truly unguarded smile Cal had seen on her face in years. I'd like that. 3 months later, the Rothko went to auction at Sotheby's. It sold for $52 million, exceeding all estimates. The Monroe Foundation was fully funded. Cal, Mia, and a board of trustees began implementing their vision. The first initiative was a mobile art education program, a renovated bus equipped with reproduction prints, art supplies, and trained teachers. It would travel to rural schools across Tennessee, bringing art to children who'd never visited a museum. Jesse designed the program's logo, a simple drawing of the cabin with a rainbow of colors streaming from its windows. It was perfect. The cabin became the foundation's headquarters. The original basement was converted into a climate-controlled gallery for rotating exhibitions. The second basement was preserved as Adelaide's memorial room, open to researchers and visitors who wanted to understand the collection's history. The first exhibition opened 6 months after the ruling. Hidden Treasures, the Monroe Collection, would tour regional museums across Appalachia, small institutions that could never afford to display works of this caliber. The Hopper painting was displayed first, the one Boone had recognized that first day in the basement. A plaque beside it read, "On loan from the Monroe Foundation, Art for Everyone." Opening night brought museum curators, townspeople, and families from across the region. Evelyn gave remarks about the collection's historical significance. Then Cal was invited to speak. He stood before the crowd, uncomfortable but determined. "I don't have fancy words, but I know what it's like to have nothing, to wonder if tomorrow will be different. Aunt didn't feed me when I was hungry, but it fed something I didn't know was starving. Beauty reminds us that life is more than survival. It's about meaning." Adelaide and Edmund knew that. Vernon protected it. "Now we get to share it." The applause washed over him, but what mattered was Mia's hand in his, Jessie's proud grin, the sense that they'd honored something larger than themselves. Weeks later, Cal sat on the cabin porch at sunrise, coffee warming his hands. Mia joined him. "Morning, Dad." "Morning, sweetheart." Jessie's laughter drifted from inside, where Daniel was making pancakes. The school bus would arrive soon, decorated now with Jessie's artwork, carrying art to children who needed beauty in their lives. Cal thought about the journey, from sleeping in his truck to this moment, from broken to healing, from alone to surrounded by family. "We did okay, didn't we?" he asked. Mia leaned her head on his shoulder. "We did exactly what we were supposed to do." They sat in comfortable silence as morning light filled the valley. The cabin stood behind them, restored, purposeful, alive with meaning. Mountains rose eternal around them, and somewhere, Cal liked to think, Adelaide and Edmund were smiling. The work was just beginning, but beginning was enough.